always wanted a family of her own.
She was in and out of foster care and group homes.
The things she didn't have, she saw in him.
He was the man who made her dreams come true.
They got their own apartment and had a baby. Latiqua was determined to give her daughter a very stable and loving environment.
By all accounts, she was a success story.
Until it all went up in smoke.
Their apartment was on fire.
There are plumes of smoke, neighbors are running out.
When the firefighters entered, there was a body.
Is this a tragic accident or a deadly cover-up?
There were lighters in the hallway.
She'd asked him to leave.
There was writing on the wall long before this.
Could a desperate desire for control have cost them everything?
There's no limits to what people will do when they feel everything is falling apart.
And the fact that love can turn to death is just a horror story.
May 17th, 2015. It's just before dawn in Oxon Hill, Maryland, a suburban community just 13 miles east of Washington, D.C.
It's a place where families really come to settle down.
It's predominantly working class folks who live for work in D.C.
While the community is often quiet, this morning, Oxon Hill residents awake to the sound of sirens.
4:51 in the morning, Prince George's County Fire and EMS received a call for an apartment fire. When the firefighters first responded to the scene, there was smoke coming out of an apartment on the 3rd floor.
Neighbors are pouring out of the apartment complex. No one knows what's going on.
Once firefighters reach the burning apartment, they find the door is locked.
Once they go into the apartment, it's full of smoke, and they find most of the fire seems to be coming from a bedroom.
Firefighters work quickly to extinguish the flames.
They knock out the windows and try to ventilate the apartment, let the smoke out.
As the smoke clears, they make a tragic discovery.
There's a body laying in the bed.
It's heavily charred. It's hard to decipher how old the person is, but definitely the body of a woman.
But who is she? As firefighters process the scene, responding officers are about to get their first clue.
Stay back behind the tape.
Oh my God! It's Latiqua's apartment!
Neighbors tell them that this is the home of Latiqua Cherry, so that could possibly be her right there.
Stunning beauty Latiqua Cherry was known for her resolve and determination.
She had a very determined spirit. She wanted the best out of life. She wanted to do what she had to do to raise herself up and make things work for a better life.
Growing up, life hadn't always been easy for Latiqua.
Her mom struggled with drug addiction, so as a byproduct, she ended up in the foster care system.
She did not have a constant father in her life, and many times it seemed like there was nothing positive happening for her.
However, that all changed when she met her handsome neighbor, Maurice Wigfall.
Latiqua met Maurice when she was staying in a group home out in the Forestville area near where his parents also live.
They had this instant attraction. It didn't matter where she'd come from. It seemed like Maurice accepted her for who she was.
Tika saw in Maurice what she didn't have, which was stability, a family who cared, a loving and stable environment and upbringing.
You're sure it's okay if I stay for dinner?
Yeah, of course.
In contrast to Latiqua's upbringing, he lived in a home with his parents. He had 2 sisters, great family life.
He had 2 parents who were successful. His father was a retired military service member. He was born overseas in Europe in a military hospital. His mother worked for an area school system.
She was attracted to that lifestyle. She wanted that for her own family one day.
Latiqua and Maurice soon became inseparable and eventually started a family of their own.
When Latiqua was 19, she and Maurice had a beautiful baby girl.
She was really determined to be the best mom she could to her new daughter.
With Maurice by her side, Latiqua had high hopes for their future.
For the first time in her life, Latikwa is able to build her own support system. She has Maurice, she has Maurice's family, and they're all coming together around her daughter. And it makes her feel, for once, very secure and safe.
So the type of parental and family stability that anyone would need raising a child, she was able to find in Maurice and his family.
Maurice was all in, too. He really stepped up to provide for his family.
When their daughter was born, Maurice got a job as a union electrician.
He worked for various construction companies.
He worked in the metropolitan region on commercial buildings.
He's there for Latikwa, stepping into that fatherhood role and giving her that stability she's always wanted.
As their daughter grew older, Latikwa also found a job.
She got a job working security at a pharmacy.
She worked very hard, was well thought of by her bosses.
At one point, she even talked about possibly becoming a police officer.
She had spoken with an officer of ours about getting on the police department. He talked to her about the requirements, what she needed to do in order to apply.
She was really working to get herself to be independent and successful and do everything she needed to do for herself and her daughter.
The couple's hard work ultimately paid off, and they were able to move into their own apartment in Oxon Hill.
He helped split the rent. His parents assisted at times whenever he needed.
She really wanted to make sure that she gave her daughter a different life.
But now, the life Latikwa had worked so hard to build has gone up in flames.
When firefighters enter, they discover a woman's body on the bed in the bedroom.
They suspected that it was going to be Latikwa Cherry.
But is this a tragic house fire or something more sinister?
Did you hear something?
Yeah, I think it's down the hallway.
They hear a chirping fire alarm, but they don't know where the fire alarm is necessarily coming from.
The smoke detector had been removed from outside of the bedroom.
Hey, over here.
It had been literally just ripped out of the ceiling because there were wires dangling down.
They discover that the smoke detector is in a laundry room closet, nowhere near where it's supposed to be in the apartment.
But that's not all.
The signs that they saw from the scene were indicative of accelerant.
This was starting to look like someone started this fire on purpose.
Latikwa Cherry was finally living the life of her dreams. With a supportive boyfriend, a new apartment, and a beautiful young daughter, things seemed perfect.
Latikwa Cherry would have done anything for her daughter. She wanted her to have the world, and she would have done anything to make that happen.
But on the morning of May 17th, 2015, firefighters have just found the badly burned body of a woman inside Latikwa's suburban D.C. apartment.
The master bedroom has been engulfed in flames.
Firefighters suspect this was no accident.
The apartment smoke detector had been disconnected, and the burn patterns on the wall were indicative of an accelerant.
The fire department suspected that it was an arson, and because there was a death that occurred as a result of this suspicious fire, they made contact with the homicide unit of the Prince George's County Police.
As day breaks, detectives arrive on the scene.
When I initially arrived at the scene, there was police tape blocking off the entire street, a good number of residents standing outside of their apartments. I entered the apartment and there was black soot that covered the entire walls of the living area, the kitchen.
Detectives look over the evidence discovered by the firefighters.
There was at least 2 different small disposable lighters on the floor.
They also found an aerosol can just outside of the bedroom that detectives thought might have been used as an accelerant.
Inside the bedroom, the damage is extensive, especially to the victim's body.
There were some areas that the skin was visible, but most of it was heavily charred. I would say 80 to 90% of the body.
The body was severely burned. She was not recognizable by face.
Detectives suspect the victim to be one of the apartment's residents, 21-year-old Latikwa Cherry. They just need confirmation.
There was several small portions of her body that were not covered by burns. And on those areas, there were distinct tattoos.
The investigators took photos of the tattoos, hoping that they could be used to help identify the victim.
Though it's too soon to be sure, detectives suspect their victim may not have died as a result of the blaze.
There was a large amount of blood that came out of her neck area, which to me was indicative that it was possible that it was sharp force injuries.
As detectives look around, they notice a baby crib in the corner.
We noticed there was a baby crib inside the bedroom where the fire occurred. We were concerned that there was a child who may have been inside the residence.
It appeared that the baby was nowhere near the crime scene or the fire.
Detectives suspect the victim is Latiqua, but where's the child?
Anything is possible at that point, and if potentially a child is in danger, they have to act.
Detectives put out an Amber Alert for the missing child. With the entire police department on the lookout, detectives continue their search.
Nothing was stolen. Nothing was taken. Her TV was still in there. There was no broken windows.
There was no forced entry except the entry that the firefighters had to, break down the door when the door was locked.
Detectives examine the lock and discover an important clue.
It was impossible to lock the door from the outside without having a key.
Looking for answers, detectives turn to a group of neighbors waiting to return to their apartments.
We asked them, what they knew about their neighbor and what information they may have had about the time frame leading up to the homicide.
They do confirm that she did have a baby girl.
Neighbors tell detectives that the child's father was living in the apartment for some time, but he had moved out recently.
So you haven't seen him around lately?
Not in a while, but I heard someone up there this morning.
They heard a lot of commotion in the apartment above. It sounded like a thud, somebody throwing something to the ground and then running out of the apartment.
It was not long after that she started to smell smoke.
But you didn't see anybody?
No.
Guys, thanks for your help.
A quick check with the apartment manager confirms the neighbor's story.
Latiqua was the only one that was on the lease to that apartment.
Maurice Wigfall moved out and gave the key back.
Still, given his relationship with Latiqua, talking to Maurice was detectives' priority.
Detectives issue a bolo for Maurice Wigfall and hope the missing child is safe with her father. However, while they wait for news about Latiqua's baby, detectives will uncover another case with eerie similarities.
Just 3 days before this incident, in an upscale neighborhood in D.C. called Woodley Park, a husband, his wife, his 10-year-old son, and housekeeper were all murdered, and then their house was set on fire.
With 2 fires covering up suspected murders, the entire town of Oxon Hill grows uneasy.
It drew a lot of attention. It's unusual to have arson/homicides in the same area in such close succession.
We were concerned that there may have been some type of link between the 2 crimes.
Arson accounts for approximately 25% of all fires in the United States, claiming over 700 lives each year. With most evidence destroyed by the crime itself, arson is exceedingly difficult to prosecute. While there are arrests made in approximately 15% of arson cases, only 2% end in a conviction. Prince George's County detectives are investigating the death of a young woman believed to be 21-year-old Latiqua Cherry.
You have a very suspicious fire that looks like it could be possibly a homicide. And just 3 days earlier, you had something very similar happening in D.C.
In that case, a father, Savas, his wife, his 10-year-old son, and his housekeeper were found bound and murdered, and the house was set on fire. It was an incredible tragedy.
It was only 14 and a half miles from here, and the parallels were too similar to ignore.
The ATF agents working the DC fire travel to Oxon Hill and spend several hours comparing notes with their counterparts.
While there were similarities in the case, there were some glaring differences.
Latiqua Cherry, the suspected victim in Prince George's arson and murder case, was a single mom.
In the DC case, an entire family was executed, and the differences didn't stop there.
It's called the mansion murder for a reason. You're in a very wealthy part of Washington, D.C.
While Latiqua lived in a modest apartment, the D.C. home was lavish, with plenty of valuables to steal.
There was definitely a robbery in the case in D.C. The killer made off with $40,000 in cash, as well as the family's Porsche.
Though nothing seemed to be stolen from Latiqua's apartment, her daughter was still missing. And neither case had a solid suspect.
We don't have a killer in either case. What's really going on here?
Maybe Latiqua had some sort of personal connection with this other family.
As detectives begin working this angle, officers track down Latiqua's ex, Maurice Wigfall.
He's at his parents' house, and his daughter, in fact, was with him, safe and sound.
They are relieved that the baby is okay, but now they have some questions for Maurice.
We asked him to come back to our station so we could speak with him about the circumstances surrounding the fire.
What's going on? Is Latiqua okay?
We're trying to locate her.
Detectives don't actually tell Maurice that they found a woman dead in the apartment believed to be Latiqua, or that they were almost certain that she was murdered.
We hadn't had positive identification yet, and we believed it was a homicide, but we didn't have a ruling. So it was just kind of trying to get his information about where was she last night, where were you last night.
I was on the road most of yesterday driving back home from New Jersey.
Maurice says that on Saturday, he drove up to Camden, New Jersey to see family, and he took his daughter with him.
What time did you get in?
Kind of late, 9:30. I'm not really sure. My daughter fell asleep in the car.
And what about you? You go anywhere else last night?
No, sir. I came in and went to sleep on the couch. I didn't wake up till this morning when I went to the gym.
Where's that? Anywhere near Latiqua's place?
No, sir.
Maurice advised me that he was in no way near her apartment.
You guys get along?
Mostly.
Then why'd you move out?
No, that's my fault.
Once they moved in together, things did get a little rocky, and Maurice wasn't ready to settle down.
So where have you been?
Just been out with the boys.
You realize we have a baby, Maurice.
Maurice says that he was out doing his thing, and Latiqua just couldn't handle it.
She thought he was cheating on her, and things got ugly.
You know what? I just think it's best if you leave.
So you're kicking me out?
Get out!
Baby, please, don't.
Get out!
Okay, bye.
Maurice said that he had moved back in with his parents while things cooled off.
He says that, they were dramatic at times, but that they were working things out.
Even though they had troubles in their relationship, they did have a child together, and that's a very powerful tie.
Although Maurice is out of the house now, he still wants to maintain a relationship with his daughter.
She was still willing to co-parent with him for the sake of their daughter.
You still have keys to her place?
No. I gave them back to her when I moved out.
Okay, and...
So what's this all about? Is Latiqua okay?
Maurice is cooperative, but he asks a lot of questions of investigators. He's trying to fish for what's going on.
He starts to get agitated because they won't tell him.
We're just putting a timeline together.
Listen, man. If something's going on with Latiqua, I'm not the man you need to be speaking to.
And he volunteers that if you really want to look into somebody, maybe you should consider some of the guys she's been dating recently and see what they have to say about their whereabouts.
In fact, he singled out one guy in particular.
There's this guy she's been dating.
This guy got a name?
Darian, something like that.
She been seeing him long?
A couple weeks. I'm not really sure.
Could Maurice be offering up a new suspect to hide his own guilt? Or could Latiqua's new man be the culprit? With no time to lose, detectives try to identify the new man in Latiqua's life.
Detectives wondered how they meet. Do any friends know him? They need to find this guy.
They also look into Maurice's alibi for the morning of the fire.
We verified the gym records, and he scanned in, and he's on video, and he got to the gym at 5:45.
Maurice's mom also said she saw Maurice asleep on the couch around 3:30 when she got up to go check on her granddaughter.
Maurice's story appears to check out, and detectives have no choice but to let him go. The next morning, detectives strengthen their efforts on identifying Latiqua's new suitor.
We met with her family and relatives.
None of them had heard anything from Latiqua about a new guy in her life.
However, There's one thing Latiqua's family is able to confirm.
I showed them photographs of the tattoos on the victim's body, and the family identified that the victim was in fact Latiqua Cherry.
It's a tragic blow.
Her family had a strained past, but they were trying to rebuild their relationship.
It was devastating. They wanted to know who could do such a thing.
But they may not have to wait long. On Monday, May 18th, detectives received some news that could help solve Latiqua's case.
Through DNA evidence, the investigators were able to identify a suspect in the Washington, D.C. murders.
His name was Darren Wint.
Detectives suspect Darren Wint could be the same Darren Latiqua had started dating. That would connect Latiqua's case with the D.C. case. But detectives fear that may not be all.
Did they have a serial killer on their hands?
Prince George's County detectives have identified the burned body of 21-year-old Latiqua Cherry. They suspect foul play and believe the crime to be connected to a similar D.C. case that occurred 3 days prior.
Thanks to a DNA sample, police believe that the man who killed wealthy businessman, his wife, his 10-year-old son, and housekeeper before setting the house on fire was Darren Wint.
Darren Wint turned out to be a former employee of the family, and he held that family hostage, tied them up, and just brutally tortured them before setting fire to the house and fleeing.
Detectives were intrigued because this case was very similar to Latiqua's. In fact, her ex-boyfriend, Maurice Wigfall, has suggested that she was dating someone with a similar name.
He could be responsible for both.
When Latiqua's autopsy report comes in, it only adds fuel to this theory.
There was no smoke inside of her lungs, which means she had stopped breathing before the fire started.
The chief medical examiner determined that her death was a homicide, and the cause of death was multiple stab wounds to the left side of her neck.
Based on the report, detectives also believe that the vicious attack had taken Latiqua by surprise.
She didn't have any defensive wounds. It's common in stabbing homicides that an individual will put their hands up in an attempt to protect themselves and fight off and ward off an attacker.
There's no marks on her hands. There's no cuts anywhere else like you would expect someone to fight back.
The type of injuries that Latiqua had were indicative that she was completely defenseless.
Though the cases have similarities, detectives ultimately determine Darren Wint was not responsible for Latiqua's murder.
Their suspect in the arson and murders in Washington, D.C. was not anyone that would have had any contact with Latiqua Cherry.
He is, however, charged with a murder and arson in the D.C. case.
Ultimately, they determined that this case in Maryland was not linked at all.
Detectives are back at square one, but not for long.
A woman came in claiming to have information on Latiqua's death.
She identified herself as Tanya and said that she used to live in an upstairs apartment near the fire.
But you don't live there anymore?
No, I moved out a couple of months back.
When did you last see Latiqua?
Saturday night before the fire, we had all went out.
She said that the night prior to the fire, her and Latiqua had gone out to a neighborhood gathering.
Tanya and Latiqua go back into Latiqua's apartment.
They chatted briefly, and then Tanya decided to go to another party.
Do you remember what time you left?
It was late, really late, maybe around 3:45.
A few short hours later, Latiqua is dead.
She was possibly the last person to see her alive.
I just keep thinking maybe if I hadn't left her, maybe if she hadn't been alone.
Listen, I know this is hard, but I need you to think back. Did you notice anything out of place when you were in Latiqua's apartment?
No, not really.
She says Latiqua was always very clean. She never left her apartment messy. She didn't remember seeing any lighters laying on the ground outside of the bedroom. And as far as she can remember, the smoke detector was not pulled down. She didn't specifically look for it, but she definitely didn't see any wires hanging down.
Do you know if she was expecting anybody?
Well, Maurice was supposed to be bringing the baby back sometime on Sunday.
With Latiqua's ex seemingly crossed off the suspect list, detectives pressed Tanya for other names.
Anyone else?
Well, I don't know if he was coming by, but there was this new guy she was dating.
Tanya tells police that there was a guy that Latiqua was seeing on and off fairly recently.
Do you know his name?
Derek Thompson, he's a police officer.
The next morning, detectives are able to bring Derek Thompson in for questioning.
He was a police officer with a neighboring department, so he wasn't hard to find.
I was able to talk to him about his relationship, and they had been seeing each other for, I would say, a few months.
Detectives asked Derek where he was on Sunday morning.
He did say that he was nowhere near the crime scene when this happened, and he was totally cooperative.
Look, man, I have nothing to hide here. You guys can search whatever you want. I know how the drill go.
He did provide me with his cell phone and a series of communications that he had with her at that time.
All of his cell phone records checked out. He was nowhere near Latiqua's apartment the night of the fire.
At that time, I was able to rule him out.
Detectives head back to Latiqua's apartment building, hoping to speak to additional neighbors.
We did talk to people on the scene, but that was only a few of the residents of the building. Many of the occupants of the apartments had been displaced because of the fire and had to go stay with friends. So I had to actually go back and get a whole list of everyone who lived in the apartment.
It takes a few days, but detectives eventually track down a former neighbor of Latiqua's who may be able to crack the case wide open.
Man, I was at work the night Latiqua's apartment caught on fire. But I can tell you about that other fire, though.
What other fire?
Months in advance, the neighbor alleged that he saw someone beating up Latiqua in the parking lot of their apartment complex.
He had broken up a fight between Latiqua and another man.
A short while later, his car had been set on fire in the parking lot.
June 1st, 2015. 2 weeks after the brutal murder of 21-year-old Latiqua Cherry, detectives speak with neighbors, hoping to get more information about the single mom.
A former neighbor of Latiqua named Vincent Rodriguez had hinted that this wasn't the first fire connected to Latiqua.
According to Vincent, it had all started several months before Latiqua's murder.
Hey! Leave alone! The neighbor witnessed someone beating up Latiqua Cherry at the apartment complex.
It was her boyfriend, Maurice Wigfall.
Don't talk to me like that. Get back here. Where do you think you're going? Get out of here, bro. You really want to do this? All right, cool. Say no more.
Maurice eventually left. Latiqua went back in her apartment, and the neighbor thought that was the end of it.
But Vincent was wrong.
A short time after that, this guy's car is engulfed in flames.
Did you report it?
Yeah, they sent an officer, but it didn't do any good.
It remained open. There was never anything connecting Maurice Wigfall to this arson fire except the circumstances.
Still, the neighbors strongly believed that it was Maurice.
If that's true, detectives have to wonder, was the arson and the abuse part of a pattern?
Searching through records, detectives find a report that seems to back up the neighbor's claims.
Latiqua had filed a temporary protective order against Maurice in February of 2015, and she puts him out of the house. She's had enough.
She said one day, you know, I just don't want to be with you anymore.
So you're kicking me out?
Get out!
Don't you make me get out.
They had a big blow up.
And that escalated into a physical confrontation where she alleges that he tried to choke her. And the next day, she goes to court.
Despite the court order, Latiqua didn't cut off all contact with Maurice.
Maurice was still able to have visitation at certain times. As much as she may have had difficulty with him in their relationship, she still wanted him involved in their daughter's life.
Still, Vincent's claims, coupled with the court order, paints a very different picture of the relationship between Latiqua and her ex than he had let on. Detectives bring in Latiqua's friends to get to the bottom of things.
Latiqua's friends described Maurice as controlling, as manipulative. If she's scheduled to go to work at the pharmacy, he would tell her, I'm not available, and that she had to cancel work to take her daughter because there was really no one else that she could rely on. They said he would have her leave work early at times because he said he couldn't give her a ride home.
He held everything over her head, the child support, the apartment.
He often used that money as a way of controlling what Latiqua did.
Her friends also explain how Latiqua feared that Maurice had even begun stalking her.
Some of Latiqua's friends said that she had complained about him just being around constantly, being outside, just sitting in his car.
Another friend told police that Maurice had a key and he refused to return it, which is contrary to what he told police and that he didn't have access to the key anymore.
But that's not all.
Latiqua had told them on multiple occasions that Maurice had threatened to kill her.
In one case, she told them that Maurice said he would kill her and no one would be able to find out who did it.
So why didn't you come to us with this sooner?
Honestly, I was afraid for my own safety. I've got kids. Maurice had a very real history of violence, and they weren't sure what he was capable of.
And they're not alone. In mid-June, a month after the murder, a friend of Maurice's comes forward with a troubling confession.
This woman, she felt guilty. She disclosed to us that she was present on a day in which Maurice told others that he was planning to kill Latiqua Cherry.
She heard Maurice Wigfall say, I'm going to kill my baby's mother, and then I'm going to set the house on fire so no one will know I did it.
And you didn't say anything to anybody?
I didn't do anything, but I didn't think that he was actually gonna do it, I swear.
She didn't know Latiqua, but she could have made contact via social media or in some way to warn her about it, and she never did. And she felt guilty that she could have done something to prevent it.
When she read about what happened, she was terrified to speak up.
With her story, detectives have what they need to move forward against Maurice Wigfall.
We feel at this point in our investigation we have sufficient probable cause to get a search warrant.
On June 24th, 2015, detectives arrive at Maurice's parents' home.
They search his car, they search his house.
We were looking for any evidence like a knife, like clothing that was worn during the crime, would have blood on it.
Though detectives don't find the knife used to kill Latiqua, they do find something else.
Police searched the bedroom and they found a handgun.
So when there's a protective order in place, you can't have a gun. So he's disqualified from having a gun.
In addition, detectives locate a possible motive hidden in Maurice's things.
We located a life insurance policy that was taken out on the life of Latiqua Cherry. And the sole beneficiary was Maurice Wigfall.
The paperwork states that Latiqua took out the $50,000 policy online, but detectives have their doubts.
All the information provided for the life insurance policy is Maurice Wigfall's information. It's his address, it's his phone number, it's his email address, it is his bank account that was used to make the payments for the life insurance policy.
It is dated exactly 1 day after Latiqua took out a protective order against Maurice.
Latiqua Cherry had taken a protective order against Maurice Wigfall out on February 13th of 2015. So it seems absolutely insane that she's gonna go out and get a life insurance policy on herself and make him the 100% beneficiary of a $50,000 life insurance.
Detectives believe there's only one scenario that made sense.
Based on the timing, he had taken these life insurance policies out because he wanted to not only kill Latiqua, but to benefit from her death.
This was a cold-blooded murder.
She was leaving him. She was going to move on with her life. She was going to raise their daughter. She was going to pursue her career dreams. She wanted off the roller coaster. She wasn't going to deal with the physical abuse anymore, and he couldn't stop her anymore. He couldn't control her anymore, and he was not going to let her leave him and have their daughter. He wasn't going to do that. She was going to be his, or she wasn't going to be at all.
During a search of Maurice Wigfall's home, detectives have just discovered a possible motive in the brutal murder of single mom Latiqua Cherry.
Investigators find a life insurance policy that appears to be signed by Latiqua, and it names Maurice as the primary beneficiary.
The date on the policy was February 14th, which was just one day after Latiqua had filed a temporary protective order against him.
Maurice likely traced her signature onto that document of the life insurance policy.
Once she took out that protective order against Maurice, he was already planning to take her life.
Following the search, detectives bring in Maurice Wigfall for a second time, but Latiqua's ex-boyfriend is quick to maintain his innocence.
It became apparent to us that you took out a life insurance policy on Latiqua.
Yeah, we did that together.
Okay. And who's the beneficiary?
It should be me and my daughter. For her, as well with me, it should be probably either her or my parents, and then my daughters.
Maurice says they each took one out on each other shortly after moving into the apartment together, just in case.
Maurice also dismissed detectives' concerns about the timing of the insurance and the order of protection.
She even said herself, she did the stay away order because of the fact she was, jealous or whatever, because I was dealing with another girl.
There were issues with infidelity, that he was seeing other people.
If you're messing with another girl and y'all get a policy, why would she put your name instead of your daughter?
I mean, it's for my daughter. Regardless.
I mean, why would you put her name down?
Why would I put her?
If you were dealing with her, y'all want to. I mean, just out of curiosity.
At the end of the day, if I'm gone, she got to do everything for my daughter.
He also dismisses Latiqua's claims of abuse.
Look, she was extra dramatic with a lot of the whole abusive relationship.
He says Latiqua was just over the top and dramatic, and that he really wasn't abusing her to the degree that neighbors and friends say that he was.
Most of the time, it's me grabbing her, getting her on me, whatever, and she doing the most. Half the time.
So you never hit her before?
I have hit her before, but I haven't hit her like she's a dude or nothing like that. Never.
But Maurice's claims fall on deaf ears.
He was arrested at the conclusion of that interview.
But for the moment, detectives don't charge him with murder.
He's placed under arrest for the gun charges.
It's a violation of the protection order. But they don't have enough at this point to actually peg him specifically to the murder of Latiqua Cherry.
To firm up the murder charges, detectives subpoena Maurice's cell phone records.
His phone was using cell phone towers around the scene of the crime just before the 911 call was made that a fire was going on.
Pinging right by her home 5-6 minutes before the 911 calls. Just very odd.
In light of this new information, detectives finally believe they have enough evidence to officially charge Maurice with first-degree murder.
We knew from examining his phone records that he was on the scene. We knew that he had taken out this life insurance policy on Latiqua and that he would financially benefit from her death. We knew that he was the only person who had a key to the apartment.
When the case goes to trial in January of 2017, prosecutors still have an uphill battle ahead of them.
We have a completely circumstantial case.
What prosecutors do have is compelling motive.
Prosecutors say that Maurice had this all planned out from the beginning. The minute she took out that protective order, he took out a life insurance policy.
According to prosecutors, on the morning of May 17th, 2015, it was time for Maurice to collect.
He snuck out of his home at 4:30 in the morning and drove to Latiqua's apartment.
He had kept a copy of the key and let himself in.
Once inside, He crept quietly into Latiqua's bedroom to carry out his plan.
He stabbed her 9 times.
Then Maurice destroyed all evidence of the murder.
He pulled the smoke detector down and started a fire and tried to burn the body and the apartment.
He let himself out of the apartment, locking the door from the outside. And then he went to the gym to give himself the alibi.
In the end, the jury sides with the prosecution.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was found guilty of first-degree burglary. He was found guilty of first-degree arson.
Maurice is sentenced to life without parole for the murder and an additional 50 years for the arson.
They want to make sure that he's locked away for a very long time.
Though justice is ultimately served, those closest to Latiqua still suffer, especially her young daughter.
A little girl will no longer have the young mother full of promise, the mother that wanted to give her the life that she never had, one full of love, stability, and support.
Even though Latiqua's daughter is cared for by loved ones, the bond between mother and daughter can never fully be replaced.
Latiqua Cherry was a beautiful young lady, a loving and caring mother, a young woman with a future ahead of her. She had had a hard life and she had struggled, and she was finally getting to a point in her life where she was moving forward. And he took that away from her. He robbed her of being a mother, of realizing some of her dreams.
They were a military couple on the rise.
She was a proud Navy wife.
He wanted to be an officer.
He rose up through the ranks and earned his commission.
It was one of the proudest moments I ever had.
But pride turns to horror when he's found dead under mysterious circumstances.
It was difficult for us to determine what led to his death.
He had a problem with alcohol.
And he was also suffering from depression.
We thought it could have been suicide.
Maybe he finally drank himself to death.
Or were other, more sinister forces at play?
Something ugly did happen here.
It was all a plot. It was all a scheme.
Y'all was planning to kill him.
The whole situation was shocking.
I felt like I was locked in a bad movie.
He didn't deserve to die like that. It was just an American tragedy.
Human beings are peculiar creatures. They weave webs of lies so thick they end up suffocating themselves, thinking they are outsmarting the world. I tell you, people kill or destroy for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, but at the root it is always one of three things: money, sex, or revenge. In this case, money is the poison seeping into the soil of a fractured home. We are looking at the disappearance of Melissa Casillas in Taos, New Mexico on June 26, 2025. A mother, a wife, and administrative assistant who survived thyroid cancer only to vanish into thin mountain air on a Thursday afternoon. When you work homicides and missing persons for over 2 decades, you learn that a mother does not just evaporate, leaving behind a daughter she loves more than life itself. The husband, Mark Casillas, calls the police. He is a superintendent at a national laboratory, a hunter, a man who claims he knows the land. He tells dispatch his wife is missing. He points out her keys are on the table, her car is in the driveway, her personal items are scattered inside. But pay attention to the husband. Pay very close attention. When the family arrives expecting to find a man out of his mind with worry, they find anger instead. Mark starts bad-mouthing his missing wife immediately. He tells anyone who will listen that she ruined their finances, that she accumulated debt, that their wages were garnished, and their security clearances at work were suspended. You have to be kidding me. A man whose wife has been missing for a few hours does not hand out her financial failures like business cards unless he is trying to build a narrative. He wants everyone to believe she buckled under the pressure and walked away. He even floats the idea she left so he could declare her dead and collect life insurance. My. That is not the thought process of a grieving husband. That is the cold calculation of a man trying to explain away a permanent absence. Then we have the physical evidence, or rather the lack thereof. The police find Mark has fresh mud on his hunting boots next to a fish tank. He claims he had not worn them in ages and points to a non-existent spiderweb as proof. Then they find a drop of blood nearby. Mark offers multiple excuses. He says it might be from processing game, or maybe the dog, or maybe Melissa spilled water from the fish tank and reactivated old mud. The innocent do not need to invent 3 different excuses for a single drop of blood. They simply say they do not know. But this case is not just about a suspicious husband. It is about the dark digital footprint of a desperate woman. Melissa had 2 phones. One was factory reset at 8:02 in the morning. The newer one was wiped at 1:38 in the afternoon. Her cloud account was scrubbed completely clean. Erasing your digital existence takes time, and it takes absolute intention. Did Melissa do this to hide her tracks because she was running away from a crushing financial prison? Or did someone else force her to do it to ensure she could never be found? Let us look deep into her mind. She is drowning in debt. Her husband is emotionally abusive, laying all the blame squarely on her shoulders. She loses her work clearance, which means she loses her dignity and her livelihood. She is a woman cornered by the heavy consequences of her own life. But her anchor is her 18-year-old daughter, Sierra. At roughly 1 in the afternoon, Melissa is caught on a security camera dropping off a sandwich for Sierra at the coffee shop where the girl works. I tell you, a mother does not buy a sandwich for the daughter she is about to permanently abandon without a single word. That sandwich was not a parting gift, it was a tether. It was pure love. But then we have the video, the great complication. At 2:18 in the afternoon, a residential security camera on Highway 518 captures Melissa walking briskly down the road, alone, wearing a turquoise shirt and a small backpack. She is not stumbling. She is not staggering. She is alive. Mark uses this video as his golden ticket. Look, he says, she walked away just like I told you. But I have seen enough bodies in the woods to know better. A video of a woman walking down a road is not proof of a new life in Seattle or Colorado. It is only proof that she was alive at 2:18. What happened at 2:19? What happened at 3 in the afternoon? She had no money, no vehicle, and left behind her 90-day supply of thyroid medication. A cancer survivor does not walk away from her life, saving pills, if she plans on breathing the next week. Mark tells police to ignore tips. When a local man named Lloyd says he saw her near an old blue truck, Mark immediately dismisses it, saying it could not be her because she was not wearing a white sweater. Since when does the prime suspect direct the investigation? Then we have the other bizarre characters in this tragedy. A man on a horse named Rick Valerio tells a tourist he found a decapitated body in the mountains while searching for his missing cousin. The police confront him, he denies it, and they just walk away. You have to be kidding me. You do not just take a man at his bare word when he talks about headless corpses in the mountains. You dig until you hit bedrock. And what about Diego, the abusive ex-boyfriend, who caused a fatal car crash and sent Melissa explicit messages? The police asked him for a formal statement. He asked for an attorney, and they just let it go. Modern police work sometimes makes my blood boil. They left critical stones unturned while the husband changed the locks on his house just 3 days after his wife vanished. Mark offers a buffet of theories. She ran off with a contractor. She went to Washington. She went to Florida. When a man gives you 20 different directions to look at is because he is terrified you might look at the one spot he is standing on. Melissa Casillas walked down Highway 518 and stepped off the face of the earth. But the earth does not swallow people whole. Someone knows exactly where she took her last breath. Someone knows why she wiped those phones. Someone knows why she lied to her boss that morning. We are left with shattered family, a daughter holding on to a sandwich, and a cold, empty space where a mother used to be. The truth is out there hiding behind lies and deleted data, and one day the desert will give up its secrets because the truth, my friends, never stays buried forever. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, and they hide their darkness behind the most ordinary faces. My name is Joe Kenda, and I have seen the devil more times than I care to count. I tell you, when you look at the town of Winsboro, Texas, you see a place where everyone knows everyone. But knowing a face is not the same as knowing a soul. In the spring of 2007, a young woman named Brittany McGlone learned that lesson in the most tragic way possible. Brittany was 19 years old. She was a girl carrying the weight of a world that had not been kind to her. She worked an overnight shift at a distribution center and picked up hours at a discount store, saving every penny for nursing school. She was trying to build a ladder out of her circumstances. But her exhaustion was deeper than just physical labor. Brittany was carrying a toxic secret, a heavy burden of abuse inflicted by the very man who should have protected her adoptive grandfather. When a child is betrayed by their own blood, they seek safety in the arms of outsiders. On the 4th of May 2007, after working all night, Brittany broke her usual routine. She did not go home. She went to the house of her boyfriend, Jeff Stogner, seeking a quiet place to close her eyes before. He had to leave on a road trip with his stepfather to pick up his grandmother. She climbed into his bed wearing a simple shirt and size 5 white underwear and fell into a deep, heavy sleep. She never woke up. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, Jeff returned home and walked into his bedroom. What he found was a scene of pure madness. Brittany had been bludgeoned to death. She was completely naked, her underwear missing the walls, painted with a violent cast-off of a blunt instrument. My. You look at a scene like this, and you know instantly this is personal. This is not a robbery gone wrong. Nothing of value was missing. The only thing taken was a life and a piece of cotton cloth. But here is the detail that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The killer took a shower in the only bathroom of that house before leaving. You have to be kidding me. You end the life of a sleeping girl, a girl who never even saw you coming. And you have the absolute audacity to stand under the family showerhead and wash your blood down their drain. That is not the behavior of a panicked amateur. That is the cold, calculated comfort of a predator who feels entirely in control of his environment. Law enforcement arrived, and immediately the circle of suspicion closed tight. Only a handful of people knew Brittany was in that house alone. You look at the boyfriend, Jeff. The mother of the victim suspected him immediately. That is natural. The boyfriend is always the first stop on a murder train, but his alibi was solid. He was on the road with his stepfather, verified by store surveillance footage. They passed the polygraph examinations. You look at the grandfather, a man with a dark motive to silence the girl who held the secret of his abuse. But time cards put him at work from 7 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon. He may not have swung the weapon, but he killed a part of her spirit long before someone else took her life. Then you look at the fringes, the people lingering in the shadows of the main players. And there you find a man named Chad Carr. Chad was 25 years old, dating Jeff's high school-age sister Velva. I tell you, when a grown man in his mid-20s is hanging around a vulnerable high school girl, he is looking for someone he can manipulate. He is a coward by nature. Chad stopped by the house briefly at 8:30 that morning. The family told him not to go inside because Brittany was sleeping. He knew she was there. He knew she was alone. He knew the house was unlocked, as country houses often are. When detectives finally sat down with him, Chad did what guilty men always do. He overcompensated. He provided a timeline, so incredibly detailed, mapping out every minute of his day, every stop at a discount store and a doctor, a bank, a flower shop. Innocent people do not remember their days like a train schedule. Only a man trying to build an alibi builds a wall of words that thick. But liars always leave a crack in the foundation. Surveillance footage and eyewitnesses prove that Chad had a missing window of time between 9:21 and 10:20 in the morning. He claimed he was late to his eye appointment because he had to go home and change clothes because it was too hot. It was a mild spring morning in Texas, temperatures in the high 60s and low 70s. You have to be kidding me. You did not go home because you were sweating from the heat. You went home because you were covered in the blood of an innocent girl. When you look into Chad's past, the shadows get even darker. In 2001, he attacked a woman in a trailer in the early hours of the morning, striking her in the head with a red jack handle, the exact type of heavy iron weapon believed to have been used on Brittany. He attacked her because she was about to expose his affairs. Years later, he served 10 years in prison for sexually assaulting his ex-wife. He was a man who used violence to solve his problems and silence his fears. You even see reports of extreme animal cruelty in his background. People do not wake up one day and decide to commit murder. They practice. They test the waters of their own depravity. A search of his belongings turn up white shorts with suspected blood and size 5 white underwear exactly matching what Brittany wore. Though the forensic testing at the time could not conclusively prove a link, the circumstantial evidence was deafening. Velva, his teenage girlfriend, told police that when he picked her up from school that afternoon, he was nervous, and he smelled exactly like her soft soap shea butter body wash of soap kept in the very bathroom where the killer washed away his sins. But the most damning piece of the puzzle came from Chad's own mouth. When told that genetic material was being tested, he stated that his genetic material would not be on that girl or in that room. My, the tongue is a loose cannon, and it always fires at the wrong time for a guilty man. How would you know anything about the inside of that room if you maintained you never went inside the house? He spoke with the arrogance of a man who believed he had scrubbed his presence clean. For 15 years, this coward walked free, hiding behind the hesitation of a system that demanded perfection instead of truth. In 2022, a new sheriff with a spine finally arrested Chad Carr for capital murder. But justice is a fragile thing. A grand jury failed to indict him, issuing a no bill because they allegedly did not hear the full scope of the investigation. And so a killer walked out the door breathing the free air that Brittany McGlone was permanently denied. It is a failure that turns your stomach. But let me tell you something about murder. It does not go away. The file remains open. The family still grieves, staring at empty chairs and missing birthdays, waiting for a whisper of justice in a town where everyone knows everyone but nobody says a word. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We just keep hunting, waiting for the coward to make one final mistake. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, and sometimes they murder the very people who are desperately trying to save them. My. I have sat across the table from hundreds of killers in my career, and the one thing that never fails to disgust me is the sheer audacity of a parasite. A parasite does not feel gratitude. When you offer them a hand, they do not say thank you. They try to take your entire arm, and if you resist, they will take your life. This brings us to the tragedy of a young man named Spencer Irwin. Spencer was 30 years old. He was a man fighting a relentless, exhausting war with alcohol addiction. When you're fighting a demon like that, your soul is left raw and exposed. You are vulnerable. But here is the most important thing you need to know about this young man. While he was drowning in his own storm, he was still actively trying to throw a life raft to others. He reached out to the homeless. He saw humanity in the people that society had decided to throw away. He wanted to save someone else because perhaps he believed that by doing so, he might finally save himself. It is a beautiful, tragic human flaw to trust the untrustworthy simply because you share a common pain. And what did Spencer get for his profound kindness? He was found on the 1st of August, 2024, lying face down at the bottom of a dirt loading dock, stripped completely naked, surrounded by discarded garbage. The police arrive at the scene. They take one look at a naked man in a desolate area and make a fatal, unforgivable assumption. They assume he is just another transient overdose. They assume he is a nobody. They assume no one will care. You have to be kidding me. A dead body in the dirt is a homicide scene until proven otherwise by hard, irrefutable science. You do not get to look at the sky, feel a drop of water, and declare a hurricane without checking the instruments. But they did not care. They completely skipped the autopsy. The local coroner, a man equipped with a degree in agriculture business rather than a medical license, signs off the death as natural causes, sudden cardiac death. I tell you, a naked man found miles from his home, dead in the dirt, is not a natural occurrence. It is a blaring siren demanding a homicide investigation. But these investigators underestimated one crucial element. They underestimated Kelly Irwin. When the badge fails to do its job, a mother's grief becomes the ultimate, most dangerous investigative tool on the planet. A mother's love does not sleep. It does not accept polite rejection from men in suits. She demands a toxicology report. And when it finally comes back, the truth hits like a hammer. There were no lethal drugs in his system. There was only a trace amount of alcohol, measuring at 0.03, and some standard prescribed medication. No methamphetamine, no illicit narcotics. The overdose theory crumbles into absolute dust. So Kelly starts walking the streets herself. She does the fundamental footwork that the detectives were too lazy to do. She begins to build a timeline. We know that on Sunday, the 28th of July, Spencer left his apartment at 8 in the morning to walk to a phone store. He never arrived. He vanished into thin air. But look closely at the surveillance footage Kelly managed to extract from that waste yard. On Monday night, just past 10 o'clock, a white vehicle pulls into the deserted loading dock with its headlights completely turned off. It stays for less than 15 minutes and then vanishes into the dark. A solitary figure is briefly seen walking away. You do not drive into a pitch black, isolated waste yard in the dead of night with your lights out unless you are hiding something sinister or someone. Let us analyze the crime scene they so carelessly dismissed. There were strange, sweeping marks in the dirt around his upper body, but absolutely no footprints leading to or from him. Dead men do not fly. If there are no footprints in soft dirt, he was carried or dragged by someone who carefully covered their tracks. When they rolled his body over, there was a distinct, straight-line mark across the back of his neck. A ligature mark? A sign of strangulation? We will never have the absolute certainty of a forensic pathologist because the system rushed to cremate him. The killer stripped him naked. Why do that? It is a calculated move. Yes, it removes physical evidence. Clothing that might harbor trace genetic material from a struggle. But psychologically, it is an act of total erasure. To leave a young man naked in the dirt is the ultimate cowardice. It is an arrogant attempt to reduce a human life to nothing. Now look at the vultures who were circling Spencer in his final days. Look at the psychology of the predators in his orbit. We have a neighbor named Tyler who allegedly broke into Spencer's sanctuary weeks prior, stealing his computer and gaming console. A thief is inherently a coward, a bottom feeder looking for a quick score. But my eyes are drawn very heavily to a man named Angel Gonzalez. Spencer met Angel at a detox center. Spencer, in his infinite kindness, offered this homeless man a place to sleep while they waited for a rehabilitation program. On the exact day Spencer was supposed to check into that program, he disappears. 2 days later, the landlord opens the door to Spencer's apartment and finds Angel sitting right there, comfortably living in the home of the man who had vanished. He lies and claims to be a cousin. Later, a social media account bearing Angel's middle name and exact birth date magically appears as a suggested contact on the phone of Spencer's girlfriend. This is the mind of a psychopath. The perpetrator saw Spencer's empathy as a weakness to be exploited. They moved into his life, took his resources, and when a confrontation inevitably occurred, they took his life. Then they drove his body to a dark corner, dumped him like trash, and went back to sleep in his bed. It takes a terrifying level of emotional detachment to murder a man and then comfortably inhabit his space. But criminals are not ghosts, and they are certainly not geniuses. They make mistakes. They always do. They leave a digital footprint. They get overconfident. They think because the initial responding officers looked the other way, they have gotten away with the ultimate crime. The police failed Spencer Irwin. They looked at a struggling man and saw an easy statistic to file away in a drawer. But a victim is a victim, whether they live in a mansion on a hill or struggle with a bottle in a small apartment. You owe them the truth. You owe them justice. Thanks to a mother who refused to be silenced, the investigation is finally being forced open. The truth is sitting right there, hiding in subpoenaed phone records and the cowardly silence of the men who took advantage of a kind soul. Guilt is a very heavy anchor. Policy was intended to ensure the survival of the family business should anything happen to the elders. He provided an airtight alibi for himself and the rest of the family, explaining that they had been playing cards together until late into the night. To verify his story, police collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and other relatives, comparing them to the evidence found at the crime scene. A distinct DNA profile was successfully extracted from the discarded marijuana cigarette. Investigators hoped this would lead them directly to the killer. However, when the results came back from the national database, there was no match. The DNA did not belong to any family member, nor did it match any known offenders in the federal system. The investigation slowly ground to a halt. For 2 long years, no new leads materialized, and the case of the gentle sewing business owners grew cold. The detectives, however, refused to forget the quiet couple who had traveled so far only to meet such a tragic end. The breakthrough came in the autumn of 2015, through an entirely unexpected turn of events. A 16-year-old youth named Willie Guillory had been arrested for a felony horse theft in Houston because he was a minor at the time of the 2012 murders. His DNA had never been entered into the national database. But now, as an adult with a felony conviction, his genetic profile was uploaded into the system. Almost immediately, the computer flagged a perfect match. The DNA on the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, detectives arrested Willie on a parole violation and brought him into the interrogation room, confronted with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment. The young man broke down in tears. He confessed to his presence at the scene, but insisted he was merely a pawn. He had been brought along by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, to assist with what he believed was a simple burglary. According to Willie, his Uncle Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to make the break-in look authentic. They had intentionally thrown items around, left the blue bandana, the beer bottle, and the crushed pills to stage a gang-related robbery. When the elderly couple returned home unexpectedly, the situation escalated into violence. After incapacitating the couple, Bobby and Willie bound them with duct tape and placed them in the closet before fleeing back to Houston. When asked why they would target a couple they did not even know, Willie revealed a shocking detail. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a woman named Daphne Wright, the very spiritual advisor the family had hired years before. Willie explained that Daphne had claimed the couple owed her an enormous sum of money and that she wanted them dead if they did not pay. Armed with this revelation, the focus of the investigation shifted to Daphne Wright. Detectives discovered that her spiritual practice was highly lucrative, charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for rituals. When they attempted to speak with Chow Tran about a connection to Daphne, Chow suddenly refused to speak without his attorney present. On December 16, 2015, police arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Facing capital murder charges, Bobby also confessed, pointing the finger directly at Daphne. He explained that he had been in desperate financial straits after being laid off and that Daphne had offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby revealed that Chow and Hong had run up a massive debt with Daphne for her spiritual services, a sum ballooning to between $250,000 and $280,000 because they could not pay. Daphne had devised a plan to collect on the couple's life insurance policies. Most shocking of all, Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided by Chow Tran himself. Detectives traveled to Houston to arrest Daphne Wright. A search of her home revealed detailed ledgers listing extraordinary fees for her spiritual services, confirming the massive scale of her financial exploitation. In exchange for his full testimony against Daphne and Bobby, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity. It was a difficult decision, a deal with the devil, but necessary to secure a conviction against the true mastermind of the conspiracy. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He painted a picture of a family entirely dominated by fear of Daphne's alleged spiritual powers, claiming they believed she could place a devastating curse on their children if they failed to pay. He even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could use the insurance money to clear their spiritual debt. The defense strongly contested this, arguing that Chow had orchestrated the plot out of pure financial greed to pocket the substantial insurance payout. In September of 2019, the jury reached its verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Guillory also received a life sentence for his role in the crime. While the legal proceedings came to a close, the story left a lasting impression on the community of Arlington. It stood as a somber reminder of the dangers of extreme desperation and the tragic consequences of placing blind faith in those who prey on the vulnerable. Yet, in the quiet neighborhood where the sewing machines once hummed, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu endured, not for the tragedy that befell them, but for the decades of love, hard work, and dedication they poured into building a beautiful life for the family they cherished above all else. The morning air in Arlington, Texas, was usually heavy with the promise of summer heat. But on the 10th of June in the year 2012, there was a strange, quiet stillness that hung over the neighborhood. The city of Arlington had grown over the decades into a vibrant tapestry of cultures, home to a large and close-knit Vietnamese community that had flourished since the late 1970s. Among them were families who had built their lives from the ground up, bringing with them their cherished traditions, their culinary secrets, and an unwavering belief in the power of hard work and family unity. At 7:29 in the morning, the calm of the day was gently broken by a phone call to the emergency dispatchers. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who worked tirelessly to support his family. His voice, though trying to remain calm, carried an undercurrent of deep concern. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, speaking with the steady, reassuring tone characteristic of emergency professionals, asked for the names of the individuals in question. Chow carefully spelled them out explaining that his father-in-law was named Long Nguyen and was currently in his 70s. As Chow spoke, his anxiety seemed to mount. He explained to the dispatcher that his wife, his son, and he had gone to the residence to check on them, only to find that things were not as they should be. They had noticed that a window to the apartment was wide open, and the general state of the exterior looked highly unusual. Too terrified to step inside the dark, quiet apartment themselves, the family gathered on the manicured lawn outside, waiting anxiously for the arrival of the police. It was an unusual sight for that time of morning. When Officer Weller arrived on the scene, he immediately sensed that this was not a routine welfare check. Normally, requests to check on the well-being of citizens came later in the day, and they rarely involved an entire family standing outside in a state of quiet panic. Officer Weller, a seasoned veteran of the force with 14 years of experience, walked up to the family. He offered them a reassuring smile, hoping to ease their worries. He then turned his attention to the apartment. As he crossed the threshold, the silence inside was heavy. He began to call out, his voice echoing softly against the walls, but there was no answer. The living room was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was moved out of place. Officer Weller checked the kitchen and the bathroom, finding both empty. He then proceeded to the master bedroom. Initially, the room appeared vacant. He turned around, preparing to leave the apartment to inform the family that no one was inside and perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk in the park. However, as he reached the bedroom doorway, the beam of his flashlight caught something unusual. On the wall next to a very small, inconspicuous closet, there were faint hand smudges. It was a detail that a less experienced eye might have missed, but Weller hesitated. A quiet instinct told him that something was not right. Steeling himself, he turned back and slowly opened the small closet door. Inside, the officer's heart sank. He discovered the elderly couple, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were bound tightly with heavy duct tape, and their heads and mouths were fully covered. There was no life left in them. The scene was incredibly difficult for the veteran officer to process. For a moment, the weight of the tragedy left him unable to speak or even use his radio. He walked back into the center of the living room, standing in silence as he gathered his thoughts, before finally calling for his supervisor and the crime scene unit. When the Arlington homicide investigators arrived, led by Detective Stewart, they were equally struck by the gravity of the scene. Detective Stewart had spent 21 years in the homicide department, witnessing many challenging cases, but this one felt deeply personal and unnecessarily cruel. The initial evidence pointed toward a robbery gone wrong, but the sheer level of violence and the careful way the scene was arranged made the detectives highly skeptical. As the crime scene technicians began their meticulous work, they discovered several items that felt almost too convenient for a standard robbery. On the coffee table lay a plate with crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle. To some, this would immediately suggest local gang activity, as light blue was a color associated with certain active groups in the area. However, Detective Stewart and his team knew that real gang members rarely left such obvious, stylized calling cards at a crime scene. It felt staged, like a scene from a television show designed to point investigators in the wrong direction. The detectives decided to treat the gang theory with caution while they waited for forensic laboratory to process the physical evidence, including the hair fibers, the duct tape, and the biological samples from the marijuana cigarette. To understand why anyone would want to harm such a gentle couple, the investigators turned to the community. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were beloved figures in the Arlington Vietnamese neighborhood. Having immigrated to the United States in the year 2000, they had spent over a decade building a beautiful life. They had established a commercial sewing business, employing several family members, and eventually securing a major contract to manufacture garments for a prominent entertainment giant. Chow Tran, the son-in-law, had been the public face of the sewing business because his English was the most fluent. He was known as a hard-working family man who cared deeply for his in-laws. However, by the year 2011, the family's business faced severe challenges. They lost their primary contract, and the business began to decline rapidly. In their search for a solution to their financial worries, the family looked to the traditional beliefs of their homeland. In many traditional cultures, when a family experiences a sudden turn of misfortune, they may believe that a spiritual cloud or a curse has settled over them. To lift this perceived burden, people sometimes seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, searched through local Vietnamese publications and found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove bad luck and bring prosperity back to struggling families. Hoping to restore their family legacy, Chow contacted Daphne and arranged a meeting at her Houston home. Over the course of many months, the family became deeply dependent on her rituals. What began as a simple consultation soon spiraled into a complex web of financial obligations. Because the business did not recover, the family continued to request more intensive rituals, which Daphne happily provided on credit. Over time, the debt ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation continued into the summer of 2012, the detectives discovered that the deceased couple held a very substantial life insurance policy, valued at approximately $1 million. When Detective Stewart inquired about the beneficiaries, he learned that Chow Tran was one of the primary recipients. When interviewed, Chow explained that the policy was designed to ensure the survival of the family business in the event of tragedy. He and his family provided a detailed, consistent timeline of their whereabouts on the night of the incident, explaining they had been celebrating Long's birthday at a family gathering until late in the evening. With no direct evidence linking Chow or any other family member to the crime scene, and with the laboratory reports showing that the biological samples from the marijuana cigarette did not match anyone in the national database, the case slowly went cold. For over 2 years, the file sat on Detective Stewart's desk, a quiet reminder of an unsolved mystery. Then, in the year 2015, a sudden breakthrough occurred. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because he was now an adult facing a felony charge, his biological profile was entered into the national database within days. The system flagged a perfect match between Willie's profile and the biological material recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene in 2012. On the 17th of October in 2015, Willie Guillory was brought in for questioning. When confronted with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had been only 16 years old at the time of the incident and had been led into the situation by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie explained that his uncle Bobby had been struggling financially after being laid off from his job. Bobby had been approached by Daphne Wright, who was a close acquaintance. Daphne had complained that a family in Arlington owed her a significant amount of money and refused to pay. She offered Bobby $10,000 to travel to Arlington and handle the situation. According to Willie, Daphne had even provided them with a key to the apartment so they could enter without forcing the door, instructing them to stage the scene to look like a random burglary. With this crucial information, the police arrested Bobby Guillory on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the confession of his nephew and the progress of the investigation, Bobby also confessed. He confirmed that Daphne Wright was a mastermind behind the entire plot. He explained that Daphne had discovered the existence of the large life insurance policies and realized that the only way she would ever recover her $280,000 was if the couple passed away, allowing Chow to collect the insurance money and settle the debt. The most shocking revelation came when Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been placed under a doormat by Chow Tran himself, under instructions from Daphne. When detectives attempted to speak with Chow again, he immediately referred them to his legal representative. In August of 2016, the police arrested Daphne right at her Houston home. A search of her residence revealed detailed ledger books documenting that she had charged various clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services. To secure a conviction against Daphne, whom prosecutors believed was the true puppet master behind the tragedy, the state offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He described Daphne as an incredibly manipulative and greedy individual who exerted immense psychological control over his family. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so desperate to protect her family from Daphne's spiritual threats that she had even suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money. The defense team strongly challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he was a true beneficiary of the $850,000 of insurance payouts and had used the situation to his own financial advantage. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the crime. While the legal proceedings concluded, the memories of Long Nguyen and Hong Liu remained clear in the hearts of those who knew them. The community in Arlington slowly healed, drawing strength from their shared values of unity, mutual support, and resilience. The story serves as a profound reminder of the dangers of greed and the enduring importance of looking out for one another, ensuring that the true spirit of family and community always triumphs over darkness. The warm morning sun of June in the year 2012 began to climb over the horizon of Arlington, Texas, casting a golden glow across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. Arlington was a bustling city, a vibrant tapestry of cultures where families from all corners of the world came to weave their own versions of the American dream. Among them was a large, close-knit Vietnamese community that had flourished over the decades, preserving their rich heritage while building new lives filled with hope and industrious spirit. In a quiet apartment complex, however, an unusual silence hung in the air. Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who had worked tirelessly alongside his family, stood outside with an anxious heart. He had called for a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Li. Long was in his 70s, a gentle man who, along with his beloved wife Hong, was the heart and soul of their family. They had moved from Vietnam to the United States in the year 2000 to build a legacy of love, craftsmanship, and unity. When Officer Weller arrived at the scene early that morning, he immediately noticed that this was not a typical call. A large family group had gathered outside the apartment, their faces filled with deep concern. The morning air was cool, but the tension was palpable. The window of the residence was slightly open, which seemed highly unusual for the elderly couple, who were always meticulous about their home. With a steady hand and a calm demeanor, Officer Weller entered the apartment to ensure everyone was safe. The living area showed signs of unusual disarray, suggesting that someone had searched through their belongings. As he walked through the rooms, calling out their names, there was no response. The kitchen and bathroom were empty. Finally, he turned toward the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared quiet, but as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught faint smudges on the wall near a small closet. Trusting his training and a deep sense of duty, the officer stepped forward and opened the closet door. Inside, he discovered the elderly couple. They had been bound with duct tape, silent and still. It was a deeply shocking moment for the veteran officer. who immediately stepped back into the living room to compose himself before calling for support on his radio. He requested a supervisor and the crime scene investigation unit to secure the area and begin the process of uncovering the truth. The detectives who arrived on the scene, including seasoned investigators who had served the community for over 21 years, were deeply moved by the tragedy. Long and Hong were beloved members of the neighborhood, known for their kindness, generosity, and peaceful nature. They had no known enemies, and everyone who knew them spoke of their warmth and dedication to their children and grandchildren. In the year 2000, when Long and Hong first arrived in Texas, they had established a commercial sewing business. They poured their hearts into their work, soon securing contracts with major organizations, including well-known entertainment giants. Chow, who spoke English fluently, served as the public face of the business, coordinating with contractors and building strong relationships. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore fruit, and they lived a life of gratitude and success. However, by the year 2011, economic challenges began to affect their business. The major contracts concluded, and the family faced growing financial pressure. In search of guidance and a way to restore their peace of mind, they turned toward ancient traditions from their homeland. They believed in the protective power of spiritual guidance to help navigate difficult times, clear obstacles, and bring harmony back to their household. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, located about 250 miles away. Seeking comfort and a blessing for their business, Chow reached out to her. Daphne promised to perform rituals that would lift their worries and bring back their good fortune. Over the course of many months, the family looked to her for hope, continuing to invest their hard-earned resources into these rituals, hoping for a bright turnaround. Regrettably, the situation became incredibly complex. The financial arrangements for these spiritual services grew on credit, eventually rising to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Unbeknownst to the family, this mounting debt was creating a dangerous situation. At the crime scene, investigators discovered several items that appeared to suggest gang activity, including a light blue bandana wrapped around a bottle. Initially, the detectives considered whether local groups might be involved, but something about the scene felt too deliberate, almost as if it had been staged to lead the investigation astray. They meticulously collected every piece of evidence, including hair fibers, genetic samples from a discarded cigarette, and latent fingerprints from the tape, sending them to the laboratory for analysis. During the initial interviews, Chow explained that the family had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday the evening before the discovery. They had enjoyed a wonderful family gathering, playing cards and sharing laughter until past 10 o'clock in the evening. The elderly couple had received a ride home from another relative, which was the last time they were seen happy and well. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation continued with great care. Detectives interviewed dozens of neighbors, family members, and business associates, but no immediate leads developed. The genetic profiles recovered from the scene did not match any existing records in the national database, suggesting that whoever had entered the apartment had no prior history that would place them in the system. The case temporarily grew quiet, but the detectives never lost their determination to bring answers to the family. In the year mansion of 2015, a breakthrough occurred in an unexpected way. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the incident, was arrested in Houston on an unrelated matter because he had recently reached adulthood and faced charges that required his genetic profile to be entered into the database. His information was finally uploaded within days. The system identified a perfect match between Willie's genetic material and the evidence recovered from the Texas apartment. Detectives immediately brought Willie in for questioning. When presented with the scientific evidence, the young man became emotional and decided to tell the entire truth. He explained that in the year 2012, his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had asked him to help with a task in Arlington. Bobby had been facing severe financial difficulties at the time and had been approached by Daphne, Wright, the spiritual advisor. According to Willie, Daphne was highly upset about the outstanding debt owed by the family. She had acquired a key to the apartment and offered Bobby a sum of $10,000 to carry out a plan to recover funds or take drastic measures. Bobby, desperate to support his family, agreed to the plan. They drove to Arlington, entered the apartment using the key, and staged the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong, leaving items behind to confuse the authorities. When the elderly couple returned home, a confrontation ensued, resulting in the tragic loss of Long and Hong. With this crucial information, the police arrested Bobby Guillory in December of the year 2015. Bobby quickly expressed deep remorse for his actions, confirming that he had been led astray by his desperate circumstances and the influence of Daphne. Right. He described how Daphne had managed the entire operation, motivated by greed and a desire to collect on the substantial life insurance policies held by the family, which totaled around $850,000. The investigation then focused on Daphne Wright. Upon searching her residence in Houston, officers discovered detailed business ledgers outlining the massive fees she charged for her spiritual services, confirming the accounts of the financial pressures she placed on her clients. To build a complete and legally solid case against Daphne, the prosecutors negotiated an agreement with Chow Tran. In exchange for his full cooperation and testimony, he was granted immunity from prosecution. During the trial in August of the year 2019, Chow took the stand and described the immense psychological influence Daphne held over his family, explaining how they felt trapped by their beliefs and her demands. The defense argued that Chow had his own financial motivations regarding the insurance benefits, but the jury focused on the overwhelming evidence of conspiracy managed by Daphne and executed by Bobby and Willie. In September of the year 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she could no longer bring harm to others. Bobby and Willie also faced the legal consequences of their actions, bringing a long and complex journey toward justice to its final conclusion. The community of Arlington felt a deep sense of relief that the truth had finally been brought to light. The story served as a powerful reminder of the importance of protecting one's family, the dangers of falling victim to manipulation under the guise of tradition, and enduring power of community solidarity and dedicated public service. The memories of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee remain cherished by their children and grandchildren, who continue to honor their legacy of hard work, love, and hope in their adopted home. In the heart of Arlington, Texas, the morning sun rose over a community built on resilience, hope, and the quiet pursuit of the American dream. For many families who had traveled across oceans to build a new life, the city represented a sanctuary of opportunity. Among them were Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, a gentle elderly couple who had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, bringing with them a rich heritage, deep familial bonds, and an unwavering work ethic. Long and Hong were beloved members of their neighborhood. They were known for their warm smiles, their generosity, and their dedication to their 3 children and grandchildren. In their homeland of Vietnam, they had learned the value of perseverance, and when they settled in Texas, they set out to establish a legacy. Together with their family, they founded a commercial sewing business, utilizing their skills to create garments with meticulous care. To help manage the growing enterprise, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who possessed a strong command of the English language. Chow became the public face of the business, coordinating with contractors, managing daily operations, and navigating complexities of the American market. For nearly a decade, their collective efforts bore fruit. The business flourished, culminating in a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, bringing immense pride and financial stability to the family. Chapter 2: The Gathering Shadows. However, the tides of fortune are famously fickle. By the year 2011, the sewing business faced unprecedented challenges. The coveted contract was lost, and a shadow of financial strain began to loom over the household. In times of difficulty, human beings often look backward to their roots, seeking solace and guidance in the ancient traditions of their ancestors. For generations, many families from their homeland believed in the spiritual world, where protective deities and ancestral blessings could influence one's daily life. When modern solutions seemed to fail, Long and Hong, encouraged by Chow, decided to seek spiritual intervention to lift what they perceived as a streak of terrible luck. While browsing through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located approximately 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed to possess the unique ability to remove negative curses, bestow good fortune, and restore prosperity to struggling businesses desperate to protect their livelihood. Chow contacted Daphne and arranged a meeting at her Houston residence. During their initial consultation, Daphne performed an elaborate ritual designed to attract success. For a brief moment, the family felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that their fortunes would soon turn around. But instead of restoring their prosperity, this connection marked the beginning of a complex and tragic web of dependency. Chapter 3: The Illusion of Control. Daphne Wright was a powerful presence in her own household, married to a quiet man named Howard and mother to 3 daughters. She ran her home with absolute authority. To her clients, she presented herself as a spiritual savior, but behind the scenes, her operations resembled a high-stakes financial enterprise. She kept detailed written ledgers of her services, charging astronomical fees that ran into tens of thousands of dollars for individual rituals. As the months passed, the family's sewing business did not recover. Instead of questioning the efficacy of the rituals, Chow and Hong became more deeply entangled, believing that they simply needed more intense spiritual protection. They continued to pour their remaining resources into Daphne's services, running up a massive debt on credit that eventually ballooned to an amount between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne was not a person to forgive a financial debt. Realizing that the family was completely depleted of cash, she discovered that they held substantial life insurance policies, with coverage totaling at least $1 million. The beneficiaries of these policies included Chow Tran himself. A dark plan began to form, driven by greed and a desire to recoup the outstanding balance at any cost. Chapter 4: The Investigation Begins. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, at 7:29, the peace of the Arlington community was shattered. Chow Tran placed a call to emergency dispatchers, requesting a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long and Hong, who lived in a local apartment. When police officers arrived at the scene, they found the residence in disarray, bearing the classic signs of a burglary. Upon entering the bedroom closet, officers discovered the tragic remains of the elderly couple. The scene had been intentionally staged to mimic gang activity, complete with a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle, crushed prescription pills on a table, and a discarded marijuana cigarette. The seasoned investigators of the Arlington Police Department, including detectives with over 21 years of experience in homicide, immediately sensed that something was amiss. The staging was almost too neat, the evidence too perfectly laid out. The medical examiner later concluded that the cause of death was suffocation, a slow and tragic end that deeply saddened the tight-knit community. Detectives launched a comprehensive investigation, interviewing dozens of family members, neighbors, and associates. While initial DNA testing on the staged marijuana cigarette did not yield a match in the federal database, the investigators refused to let the case go cold. They kept the evidence safe, waiting for the one missing piece of the puzzle that would bring the truth to light. Chapter 5, The Catalyst of Justice. That missing piece arrived 3 years later, in October of the year 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the crime, was arrested on a felony charge of horse theft in Houston. Because he had transitioned into adulthood and was now convicted of felony, his DNA profile was entered into the national database. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match between Willie Guillory and the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the staged crime scene in Arlington. Detectives immediately brought Willie in for questioning. Confronted with the scientific evidence, the young man broke down and confessed, revealing that he had been brought along by his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, to carry out the crime. Willie explained that the entire event had been arranged by Daphne Wright, who had provided them with a key to the apartment. Bobby Guillory was subsequently arrested in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Desperate and facing severe penalties, Bobby also confessed, pointing directly to Daphne as the mastermind who had promised him $10,000 to execute the hit so she could collect on the family's outstanding debt through their life insurance policies. Chapter 6, The Verdict of Truth. The investigation soon turned back to Chow Tran. Financial records revealed that following the passing of his in-laws, the sewing business had folded, and Chow had purchased a brand-new home. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence of his involvement, Chow's attorney negotiated a cooperation agreement. Chow testified that Daphne had exerted an overwhelming psychological control over him and his mother-in-law, manipulating their traditional beliefs to force them into compliance. He claimed that Hong had even suggested sacrificing herself to secure the insurance money to protect the rest of the family from Daphne's spiritual wrath. In August of the year 2019, Daphne Wright stood trial for capital murder. Chow took the stand as the prosecution's key witness, portraying Daphne as a cold, manipulative figure who would stop at nothing to secure her money. The defense argued that Chow was the true beneficiary of the tragedy, pointing out the lack of written documentation regarding the massive spiritual debt. Ultimately, the jury delivered a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would never again be able to exploit the faith and vulnerabilities of others. While the legal resolution left some questions unanswered regarding the full extent of Chow's immunity, the community found solace in the restoration of peace and the clear message of the trial. The story of Long and Hong served as a powerful reminder of the dangers of extreme superstition and the beautiful, enduring strength of family love. Their memory remains cherished by their grandchildren, and the community stands stronger, united in their pursuit of honest dreams, mutual support, and the light of truth. The morning sun of June 10th, 2012, rose over the city of Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. Arlington was a sprawling city in Tarrant County, a place where different cultures came together to build lives, dreams, and communities. Among these was a vibrant and close-knit Vietnamese community, many of whose members had arrived in successive waves after the historic events of 1975. They had brought with them their traditions, their strong family values, and an unwavering work ethic, hoping to find their own piece of the American dream. On this particular Sunday morning, at 29 minutes past 7 o'clock, the peaceful silence was broken by a phone call to the emergency dispatchers. The caller was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who worked diligently to support his extended family. His voice, heavy with anxiety and trembling with a quiet fear, came through the receiver as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, trained to remain calm in moments of rising tension, asked for the names and details of the family members. Chow explained that his father-in-law, Long Nguyen, was 70-something years old and lived in a nearby apartment with his wife, Hong Lu, Chow recounted how his wife, his teenage son, and he had gathered near the residence, growing increasingly worried because they had not heard from the couple. His son had gone and knocked on the front door, but there had been no answer, even though the family noticed that one of the windows of the residence was open. To the family waiting outside, things simply did not look right. A deep, unsettling feeling kept them from entering the apartment themselves. Instead, they stood together on the pavement, waiting anxiously for the arrival of the police. Within minutes, a responding officer, Officer Weller, was dispatched to the scene. Having served on the force for 14 years, the officer was accustomed to the routine of welfare checks, which usually involved elderly residents who had simply forgotten to answer phone or had fallen asleep. But as the officer pulled up to the apartment complex, the sight of an entire family standing outside in the early morning light immediately signaled that this was not a typical situation. Welfare checks rarely occurred so early in the day, and the sheer number of family members gathered on the lawn suggested a deep, collective dread. Upon entering the apartment, the officer was greeted by a quietness that felt heavy and thick. The living room was in a state of disarray, showing the unmistakable signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered, and there was a general sense of chaos. Officer Weller began to call out, searching for any sign of life, but there was no response. The living room was empty. The kitchen and the bathroom yielded nothing. The only remaining room to inspect was the bedroom. Initially, a quick scan of the bedroom did not reveal anything out of the ordinary. The room seemed empty, and for a brief, hopeful moment, the officer thought that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool air with a flashlight in hand. The officer prepared to turn around and leave the room to reassure the waiting family. But as a flashlight beam swept across the wall near a very small closet, something caught the officer's attention. There were hand smudges on the plaster, faint but distinct, near the edge of the closet door. An instinct, honed by years of experience, urged the officer to hesitate. There was an internal whisper warning against opening that door, a sudden weight of apprehension that pressed down on the room. Yet, duty demanded a thorough search. Stepping forward, the officer reached out and opened the small closet door. Inside, the grim reality of a terrible crime was revealed. Two figures, identified as the missing mother and father, were discovered. They had been bound with duct tape, their heads and mouths covered, showing clear signs of a violent struggle. In that split second, the officer knew that they were gone. The sheer brutality of the scene was shocking, leaving even a veteran officer momentarily speechless. Walking out of the bedroom and into the living room, the officer stood in silence, struggling to process the scene before finally gathering the strength to use a radio to request a supervisor in the crime scene unit. When the Arlington homicide investigators arrived, led by detectives with over 2 decades of experience, they were equally struck by the gravity of the scene. Detective Stewart, a seasoned investigator who had spent 21 years in the homicide division, noted that this was one of the most severe cases he had ever encountered. The physical evidence suggested a struggle that had begun right at the front door, with traces of conflict marked on the carpet, the couch, the table, and the walls. The victims had suffered blunt force trauma, possibly from a heavy, blunt object like a hammer or a small bat, before being placed in the closet. What initially crossed the minds of the investigators was a robbery that had escalated into violence. The apartment had been ransacked, with compact discs and personal belongings scattered across the floor. Yet, as the detectives looked closer, certain details began to feel unusual. On the coffee table lay a plate with crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a partially burned marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left in a prominent position as if it were a calling card. In Arlington, there were active local gangs, some of which were known to use specific colors and symbols to claim responsibility for their actions or to intimidate others. The presence of the blue bandana immediately prompted the detectives to consult with the department's gang unit. However, seasoned investigators know that sometimes a scene can appear too perfect, too deliberately arranged to tell a specific story. While a gang-related extortion attempt was a viable theory, the extreme personal nature of the crime made some detectives wonder if the scene had been staged to mislead them. As the forensic teams began their meticulous work, gathering hair fibers, swabs of blood, and processing the duct tape for latent fingerprints, the community began to mourn. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them their beloved family, their traditions, and a desire to build a legacy. They had established a commercial sewing business in Arlington, enlisting the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who spoke fluent English and became the public face of the enterprise, dealing with contractors and handling business relations. For nearly a decade, the family business thrived. They secured lucrative contracts, including agreements to manufacture garments for major commercial entities, even producing items associated with large companies like Disney. It was a realization of the American dream they had traveled so far to find. They were well regarded in the local Vietnamese community, known as a gentle, generous, and hard-working couple who kept to themselves and had no known enemies. However, by the year 2011, the family's business fortunes began to decline. They lost their major contracts, and financial difficulties began to mount. In times of deep distress, when facing the threat of bankruptcy or hardship, some families of their generation turned to traditional spiritual beliefs for guidance and protection. They believed in the existence of spiritual advisors who could perform rituals to remove negative influences, lift perceived curses, and restore good fortune. Searching through a local Vietnamese language newspaper, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advertiser, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed the ability to remove bad curses and bring prosperity to struggling businesses. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow made contact with Daphne and drove to Houston for a consultation. After a ritual was performed, the family felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that their fortunes would soon turn around. Yet, 1 year later, that hope was shattered by the events of June 10th. The investigation proceeded with urgency. On June 11th, detectives attended the autopsies at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical examiner confirmed that while the victims had suffered significant physical trauma, the actual cause of death was suffocation, resulting from the extensive layers of duct tape wrapped around their faces. This revelation added a layer of profound sadness to the case, highlighting the need to identify those responsible. While the detectives pursued the gang theory, keeping an open mind, they received an unexpected phone call that shifted their focus. An insurance company contacted Detective Stewart to report that there were substantial life insurance policies active on the victims, totaling at least $1 million. When the detectives inquired about the beneficiaries of these policies, they learned that Chow Tran was among them. On June 13, 2012, detectives invited Chow Tran to the police station to discuss the business, the family's financial situation, and the insurance policies. Chow explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the insurance policies were intended to ensure that the family could continue to operate the business and support themselves if a tragedy occurred. When questioned about his family's whereabouts on the night of the murders, Chow provided a detailed and consistent timeline. He explained that they had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday at a family gathering. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves, staying until approximately 10:30 in the evening, when they were driven home by another family member. Chow and the rest of the family had remained together, playing cards and socializing until late into the night, giving them a mutual and solid alibi. To ensure a thorough investigation, Police collected DNA samples and fingerprints from Chow and other family members to compare against the evidence collected from the apartment. The forensic lab successfully extracted a DNA profile from the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. Investigators hoped this would be the key to identifying a suspect, but when the profile was run through the national database, there was no match. Neither the family members nor any known individuals in the system matched the DNA or the fingerprints. This suggested that the contributor of the DNA might be an individual who had never been convicted of a felony, or perhaps a minor whose profile was not yet registered in the national system. Despite interviewing between 50 and 60 individuals, including neighbors, business associates, and acquaintances, no solid leads materialized. The investigation began to slow, and for more than 2 years, the case remained unresolved, sitting quietly in the department archives. Then, in the year 2015, a sudden breakthrough occurred. The catalyst for this development was an unrelated incident involving a 16-year-old youth named Willie Guillory, who had been arrested in Houston for the felony offense of taking a horse without permission. Because he was a minor at the time of the original incident in 2012, his profile had not been in the database. However, once he was convicted of felony as an adult, his DNA was entered into the national system. Almost immediately, the system identified a match between Willie's DNA and a profile recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene in Arlington. On October 17, 2015, investigators located Willie Guillory, who was also facing a violation of his parole for failing to check in with his officer. During his initial interview at the Arlington Police Department, Willie initially denied any knowledge of Arlington or the crime. However, when the detectives explained the scientific accuracy of DNA evidence and how it placed him directly inside the apartment, the youth broke down. Willie confessed his involvement, but quickly added that he had not acted alone. He explained that in 2012, when he was just 16, he had been living with his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had told him that they were going to Arlington to assist with a task, and Willie felt he had no choice but to accompany him. On June 9, 2012, they made the 3-hour drive from Houston. Willie claimed that his uncle possessed a key to the apartment, which allowed them to enter and stage the scene to look like a burglary. They had brought items such as beer bottles, a blue bandana, and a marijuana cigarette to create the illusion of gang activity. When the elderly couple returned home, a physical struggle ensued. Willie admitted to running toward the door to prevent Hong Lil from escaping, while his uncle subdued Long Nguyen. Once the couple was incapacitated, they were bound with duct tape and placed in the closet. When asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed a crucial piece of information. He stated that the entire action was a murder-for-hire plot arranged by a woman named Daphne Wright, whom his Uncle Bobby knew. Willie claimed that Daphne had told his uncle that some people owed her a significant amount of money and had refused to pay, prompting her to seek an extreme solution. Willie asserted that Daphne was the driving force behind the plan, and that she had provided the key to the apartment. With this testimony, detectives charged Willie Guillory with murder and immediately turned their attention to locating Bobby Guillory and investigating Daphne Wright. They discovered that Daphne operated as a spiritual advisor in Houston, offering services to clients seeking to improve their businesses or remove personal difficulties. She had built a substantial client base and was well known in certain circles. When detectives reached out to Chow Tran to ask if he was familiar with Daphne Wright, his response raised their suspicions. Rather than speaking with them directly as he had done in the past, Chow referred the investigators to his attorney, who stated that any future communication must go through legal channels. This shift in cooperation suggested to detectives that Chow was aware of the unfolding developments. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to apprehend 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Bobby was arrested on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially quiet, Bobby decided to cooperate after being presented with a search warrant for his DNA. Expressing remorse and fear, Bobby confirmed much of his nephew's story, placing the responsibility on Daphne Wright. Bobby explained that he had met Daphne in 2011 when he was unemployed and facing severe financial difficulties. Sensing his desperation, Daphne had offered him $10,000 to carry out the act. According to Bobby, Daphne functioned similarly to an informal lender, and the elderly couple, along with Chow, had accumulated a debt to her of between $250,000 and $280,000 for her spiritual services. When the family was unable to pay, Daphne learned of the substantial life insurance policies. She allegedly proposed that the collection of these policies would allow the family to settle their outstanding debts with her. Bobby further claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided by Chow Tran, who had left it in a designated spot for them to retrieve. Armed with these statements, detectives focused on Daphne Wright. On August 31st, 2016, they visited her home in Houston. Daphne was described as a strong, direct woman who managed her household with authority. While she acknowledged knowing Chow Tran as a client, she declined to discuss the details of their financial arrangements or her business transactions. Detectives subsequently obtained an arrest warrant for Daphne Wright and a search warrant for her residence. During the search, investigators discovered a detailed ledger outlining the fees she charged for her spiritual consultations and rituals, with some entries showing charges of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000. Her husband, Howard, cooperated with the police, maintaining that he had no knowledge of any unlawful activities and was entirely unaware of the situation. Upon her arrest, Daphne declined to make a statement without her attorney present. Meanwhile, financial investigations revealed that after the deaths of his in-laws, Chow Tran had purchased a new home, and the family's sewing business had been permanently closed. To build a strong case against Daphne Wright, whom they viewed as the central organizer of the plot, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution